What do a speaking coach, a strategy consultant, and a global career coach have in common? Sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But honestly, it's all about finding out what people really do in their jobs. The stories, the struggles, the coffee breaks. The real stuff you won't find in a job post.
Welcome to a space where we sit down with people from all kinds of careers, have a laugh, and dive into what makes their work meaningful. Whether you're looking to learn something new or just here for a good story, let us be your guide. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Charlie.
And let's get Casually Bro! Woo! Today, we're sitting with Tanja. Tanja, we met a few years ago in France, in Strasbourg. You were at that time an accomplished member of the Toastmasters Club, and I just started. Even if it wasn't formal, I considered you as a mentor because I loved the way you presented. You had this way of putting your personality. I love it. Tanja, you're a career coach specialized in international career transitions. I'm so happy to be here with you today. Can you please start by telling us who you are, what you do, and how you got there?
Well, what an introduction. Thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you, Charlie, for having me here. Gosh, who am I? My name is Tanja Podvrsan, originally from Slovenia, grew up, professionalized in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the Midwest of the United States of America. And then I matured in France with a Colombian, Austrian guy, two kids who are third culture individuals. They were born in the States. They speak French. They're in between Spanish and German and some dogs. And what do? I'm a global career coach. How I got to be a global career coach, complete mess. And what I say mess, there's always a message in a mess. But a couple of years ago, I was at the as I would call it, at an intersection of my professional career where recruitment was changing. The job seekers were no longer job seeking, but they were job shopping, and they were being a little bit more aware of what they want. They want more life balance, career balance, and starting to check in the salaries and what they can get for that. And on the other hand, since I was in recruitment, I had companies who confided in me in missions, and the companies also, sometimes they changed, sometimes they didn't, but the World Wide Web became more and more used. So what they did was often copy paste the job application saying, I want a trilingual secretary who is a bit of a scientist and can sell for $20,000, no commission necessary. And that's what I thought, do I stay or do I go in this recruitment business? And that's where I started thinking, and I thought, do I stay or do I go? Well, I stayed on. And that's when I basically got retrained, certified as a coach, got training in digital marketing to start selling a little bit more in a different way, or marketing my service in a different way. And lo and behold, one of the first times that I started to practice was very close to when I met you, Jeff.
So let me get this straight.
Okay.
You went from your home country to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, of all places, and then France, and now you're helping people navigate similar career transitions and life transitions and culture transitions in a way that brings out the best in them career-wise. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, Charles. You got that.
That's fascinating. I'm sure your life probably led you down that direction, but I'm a sucker for stories. And one of the most important stories, I think, is the one when you first realized that this is what you wanted to do. Could you tell us about that moment where the light bulb clicked and you said, this has to be it. This has to be what I do for the rest of my life, or at least for the rest of my foreseeable future?
Excellent question, Charles. I think I had three light bulbs. The first light bulb was a bit of a weak one, and it goes back to when I was basically 17, 18, earning my money because when I decided to go to college, I had to basically pay it for myself. So I worked at an ethnic family restaurant, and in that family restaurant, basically, we were waiters, waitresses. My mom was the chef there, and so the people came and went, and everybody spoke different languages, and often I found myself translating during the interview. And that was like probably my first light bulb moment where I thought, this is kind of cool. I wonder where could this get me? But I didn't really realize it until like, fast forward maybe 6 or 7 years later when I finished my studies, and I did finish my studies in human resources, well, and in business actually, but I went automatically into recruitment. My first job was with Manpower in Milwaukee. And that looked very different. One of the first assignments was just basically recruiting for technical roles. And I really enjoyed that because even though there were, US Americans applying for these jobs, there were also people who didn't master the language, and to try to translate their value that they're bringing into the job was challenging. So I continued to do that, and in translating and speaking the different, not so much speaking the languages, but trying just to understand that culture where a person comes from when you're immigrating, or maybe being a refugee and finally got your papers where you want to get that job. So that was my second light bulb. Yeah, to answer your question.
Wow, so it seems that you were in an international environment when you were already very young. And this is probably something that shaped who you are, how you think, how you interact with people.
You're probably right. It's just that the funny thing is that I was having fun and enjoying myself so much. I was completely unconscious of it. I went along the way, and I always knew that I would enjoy working with people. That was never, I think I was very fortunate because I knew that wherever there was people that were looking for a job, and people who were looking that had an issue but couldn't find the job or the talent, I always found myself in this situation, and I have to say I was always it was an exciting moment for me, and I enjoyed it. And regardless of the language or regardless of the culture, I enjoyed it. So having said that, I always knew I was in the right place. So that permanent light bulb was always there. But what happened was that when I did make the change from then being in the US and then going into an expat assignment and being moved to France. And France was not our first choice. We had three choices. We had, I think it was Italy, Brussels, and France. And ever since I was little, I had this dream to come to France.
Wow.
And in high school, when I took my French classes, I remember calling myself Chantal, and I remember watching Jules et Gilles, the movie, and I was just dreaming. So I said, it was my husband who was being moved for an expat assignment, and we both wanted to go, and the whole kit and caboodle. And I said, let's pick France, and we came to France. But that's when I felt like, here we are, we were in France, we settled down, but you know what? All that Balzac grammar did not help me to find the job, nor diapers, nor the doctor. And so I started all over again. I felt really I was starting all over again.
That's incredible. There's so many wonderful opportunities that come from going to an entirely new environment. And I'm sure it's even compounded if it's in a new country or a new, part of the world that you maybe even dream of, but you don't have experience in. Uh, it's fascinating. And so in your work, how do you help people navigate that translation, navigate that change because it must be really intimidating to say, okay, well, maybe I grew up in this part of the world for decades and now I'm just going to casually move to Brussels or Hong Kong or Australia even. How do you get them comfortable with the idea of, yes, it's going to be a massive change, but you're also going to grow?
Great question again. I think a skill that we lack in today, and I think it's a skill that's so important, is listening. Is to really listen, understand, and if you don't understand, if I don't understand the person in front of me, I'll reiterate and ask until I understand. And often during that part of having that conversation, it's not a conversation, it's basically trying to understand. It's during that time that a lot of magic happens in coaching, because a lot of the time most people come to me and say, yeah, Tanya, I need, it always starts with like a resume or a CV or something like that, but it ends up to being something completely different. And often it's because they most of my clients come and say, well, I'm stuck, and the first thing I do when I look for a job, I write a resume. And my question is, why? Tell me about your resume. What is it that you're looking for? And that's where the conversation starts. And that's where I ask questions to really understand not just who they are, and have a conversation that's kind of like horizontal, like going from point 1, 2, or 3, but it's more like, okay, we're starting at point 0 and we go more vertical. We're going deeper in the conversation. So I ask more like, where do you come from? What is it that you want? Just a lot of questions. And during that question and trying to understand where they come from, most of the time my clients, believe it or not, figure it out themselves, because they haven't had that opportunity to just kind of speak it out and have someone listen and repeat what they said, of course, in my own words. And sometimes, we're going through 2, 3 different languages. Sometimes I take out a pen and paper and we draw or we mime, but really to understand the starting point, where they're coming from. And that's really, really important, because if I go back just to my humble transitions, when I moved from Slovenia, or what was before Yugoslavia, and we immigrated to the US, I didn't know. I knew 2 days before we left, we kind of escaped into this whole situation. So I had no idea. Nobody really kind of asked me. I just followed my family because that's what a 10-year-old does. And so with hindsight, I spent a lot of time just asking that question, like why, where, how, or just letting the stage be them.
Wow, you shared something very profound about making the effort to really understand someone. And yeah, there are many times where you get insights, not by thinking yourself, but when someone's trying to understand you and then uncovers the principles you're using to take those decisions, and and then you realize that it doesn't make sense. But you wouldn't have not known for yourself. You need someone that make this trying to understand, really understand, not just yeah, it's so easy when you talk to someone and there is a part you don't understand to just ignore it, or sometimes just to just you put your head from the top to the bottom, like you understand, and then you go through something else. But real connections most often start with this a little bit awkward moment where we ask again and again the same type of questions because there is something that doesn't feel very, very right. Tanya, I'd like to ask you about your experience, personal experience, but also with the person that you are coaching. You moved to the US, you had a big transition, and then you went to France, you had a big transition. Is it kind of similar to have a transition when it's different countries? And when you're when you're working with your clients, is it very different, the type of work you do, depending on the country the client will move to?
Absolutely. It's not so much the country that the person comes from, it's the person themselves. Because if you're talking to a refugee versus an immigrant versus an expat, those are three different situations. A refugee or an immigrant, often they may or may not have the choice. Whereas an expat, you have the choice. You have this luxury of saying yes. The company recognizes that I've done something, and you're promoted to go and help and transfer knowledge or support a branch abroad. And you get the whole package of a car. They may or may not really help you with the rent. You get a very big package. Whereas on the other hand, that's not often the case. I work with some refugees who come with a bag and a book, or maybe nothing at all. So it really depends. Now, I say refugee, immigrant, or expat, and those are categories, but I don't like to focus on categories. It's really to understand the person. Are they coming with choice, or have they been forced to move and transition? And to really understand that first part, because that first part is really important. Not only important for the person, but to understand in helping them job search. Because sometimes there are clients who have been doctors in their country, but because of war or for whatever reason they change, and they come, for example, to France, and they find out they can't do it, and that can be very a traumatic situation. So you don't want to go there right away. You want to understand fully, or as much as possible, the person, where they're coming from and what they've done, before you even think of the word solution. I mean, that would be way too premature. So yeah, absolutely, to really know the beginning and the deepness of that person. It's kind of almost like opening up a box, a treasure, and seeing what's inside that treasure. That's how I would say it.
You bring up a really interesting point, and it's something that I think all three of us can sympathize with, being coaches. That very often, uh, client will come in and ask for a solution right away. They say, I'm having this particular issue, or what they consider to be the issue, and that might not always be the case. That might not always be the primary uh, problem that they're facing, but they feel as though it is. And I think a big part of what a coach does is dig a little deeper, find the primary part, and then explain how it becomes the feeling of the secondary and tertiary experience that they're currently feeling, that panic, that fear, that level of discomfort, and work on the actual problem itself. But very rarely does that happen easily. Can you tell us about maybe a time that you've had to face that level of adversity with a client? I need the answer today. I need the solution solved right now, and maybe how you went about showing them that the quick solution isn't always the best.
Excellent question. I would say that the word coaching in itself is, you enter into a partnership in looking at what is the client calling as an issue, what is their challenge, and what is success look like. So me as a coach, I enter into a partnership. If they're looking for a result, then I would say I usually have an intake. I have an intake meeting with them to see whether we're a fit or not. Because if someone is really looking for a solution, well, then I'm going to send them to a consultant or a trainer, and then that's the end of that. But what happens is that the consultant and trainer will finish, and guess what? They're coming back because they didn't get the answer to begin with. So often what I do is I take the lead of the person. I explain what coaching really is. It's a partnership. We're going to talk. You come in and tell me what is it that you want to deal with and what the success look like. And we basically are kind of like taking thread by thread and making this piece of we're knitting something. We don't know what we're knitting, but we're knitting something. And I really believe that it's my client who is leading. I'm not leading. I'm just trying to open space, develop trust, because trust, that's a big word. When you establish a certain trust environment, that changes everything. That's when you can really have a conversation and have this deeper conversation, deeper level as to, it's like the iceberg. On top of the iceberg, if I take the example of job search, on top of the iceberg, you see the resume, you see cover letter, you see interviews. But underneath the iceberg, it's the motivation, it's my background, it's my inner critic, it's my culture, it's my languages, it's my fears, it's all of that. And to uncover that bottom part of the iceberg, that takes trust and it takes time. Rome was not built in a day. My career, the way I see it, was not built in a day either. It was built in 56 and a half years. That's my age, So good things, I wouldn't say good things, but things come with time. And that's what, for me, coaching is all about.
That's a very good reminder, Tanya, because we live in a world where we feel like if we try something and we don't succeed in a few weeks or in a few months, it means it's done forever. And I tend to fall in this trap too. And every once in a while, I remind myself that, wait, Jeff, look, you are 35, I think, if I'm not didn't think about it, but I think that's it. And you have so many years left to learn and to try new stuff, new things, and to discover new ways of doing. And if you look at what you're doing right now, not in the short time frame of the short term, will it work in a month or two, but over your life, it changes everything, because then you realize that you have the time to make mistakes, you have time to learn, and that every mistake that you can make isn't terminal. It's just something in the process. Tanya, I'd like to ask you tip for people who are either about to transition in a new country or would did that recently. Do you have one tip? Like one tip, if tomorrow I have someone who's going in a new country, what would be the one tip that could really make a difference?
Speak the language a little bit and learn the cultural faux pas. That would be probably the first thing. No matter, I think the way the world is going on, we depend a lot of technology, and for some reason we hide behind those tools, and all of a sudden, we have AI, we have IT, and we hide behind these things, and we almost like we use them, and it becomes a certain shield or a certain mask, And at the end of the day, these are just machines that are made by us. So take it off and speak the language. Say hi. If you don't know, mirror until you feel like it's going there. And so those are the two things I would say. Yeah, most of the world speaks English, and I think it's actually more non-natives today than natives that speak English, which is just flabbergasting. And then with that comes all the accents, and then the English is getting complex itself. But to speak a few words in French or in English or German or Spanish or Korean or you name it, those few little words, that's going to make a huge difference, because in the job market, it's the hard skills that get you the job, but it's the soft skills that keep you in there. So those would be my tips. I don't know. What do you think? Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
You know, it's phenomenal the real amount of value that you get from understanding cultural norms. And here's the thing, because I think, and I deeply agree with you that uh soft skills are so important when you're looking at not just surviving in a corporate setting or in a business setting, but also being able to integrate yourself in where you live. Um, and it really matters how much attention you put into learning, right?
Mm.
One of the funniest things that I see here in New York is being able to make a clear distinction between someone who lives here versus someone who doesn't. And the reason that I can tell has nothing to do with the way they're dressed or their mannerisms or accents or anything like that, because you can have a completely different accent and you can still be a New Yorker. But the one thing that I can tell if you are a New Yorker or not is how fast are you walking? And are you looking
Oh,
ahead of
really?
you or are you looking around?
Ah,
Because if you're walking quickly, that means you respect everyone's time and you're not trying to be in the way of people. If you're walking slowly and looking around, it's a beautiful city and there's a lot to see, but pull over to the side, look around and let people get around you. But these types of cultural norms and values that you see inside of unique ecosystems don't really translate when you use technology, right? If I ask ChatGPT, how can I look like a real New Yorker? They're going to say, okay, maybe dress in black or get a coffee outside of Times Square, and none of that works because that's an amalgamation of really, I guess, bad stereotyping. The same way, if I wanted to look like a Parisian, I think ChatGPT would tell me to wear a beret. And that probably wouldn't do anything other than make me look weird. But I think with all that in mind, when you're looking at the soft skills that make people really able to integrate into these ecosystems, these different parts of the world, what do you kind of tell people to look towards? Is it signs of respect? Is it more operational things like knowing which side of the street you need to walk on? How do you get people starting to think organizationally in how do I integrate?
it's an excellent question. And I always start with, have you visited the country before and what was your experience, Because nowadays I think it's almost dangerous to say, oh, in Paris, you have to, like you mentioned, you can't say Parisians are this way and the Southern Germans are that way and the South Koreans are that way. Because what's happening is you have like, you have a person who's, they say they're Germans, but they have Turkish origins. Their parents are Turkish and their spouse is US American, but their spouse was US Americans. They're half Colombian and half Russian. So that has to be erased. I think we're the tradition of always categorizing and putting people into these drawers. Probably I'm kind of speaking of Franglish here. Drawers or into categories is something that's non-productive and it could be potentially a red flag thing to do. What I would say, start with a question. And if you say hello, guten Tag, bonjour, just in that language of the country where you are, that goes a long way. And not assume, okay, everybody speaks English, I'm gonna go with it. Just a week ago, I spoke to a friend of mine. First time she comes to Paris from Chicago, and she said, "Hey, garçon." Well, guess what? She was never served because it's offensive. You don't do that, and it's offensive. You don't call the garçon. The word garçon in French is a boy. You don't call a waiter a boy. So just get the basics down first. Just bonjour, hello, goodbye, please, thank you, I'm sorry, excuse me. Those would be probably the 6 words. You don't need to even, ask ChatGPT for those 6 things and you're done. Bingo. And just, when in doubt, don't do it. Don't do it. But if you're, of course, if you're in an emergency case scenario, then the things will change. All of that is I'm saying is that being humble and just questioning a little bit and doubting and just making a baby step or mirroring can go far further than just speaking and assuming everybody understands me the way I am. So that would be probably the tip that I would give. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Oh, completely. As a traveler, as someone who fell in love with traveling years ago, the first thing I used to do when going to a new country was to ask how to say thank you. And then it was nice because every time I was talking to someone, I could say thank you in the local language, and people used to like it. And I had a lot of very positive interactions. I also have this experience of going in Japan a few times, and the first time I didn't speak any Japanese. And I remember it was quite hard, couldn't connect with people. And I also met people, other travelers, who said that, and it's something that we hear a lot, Japanese people are so closed. They're very cold. They don't open up. But what I found a few years later, having learned a little bit of Japanese, is that if you go to them and you talk a little bit broken Japanese, konnichiwa, watashi wa Furansujin desu. And then usually they laugh and then they speak broken English because, yeah, most people around the world have broken English, don't feel very comfortable talking in English. And if you ask them, do you speak English? They will say, no. Obviously. But if you show them that you're even worse in their language, they will open up their English. And it worked recently for me. Nowadays, I'm living in Germany. And my neighbor, at first, told us that he didn't speak English. No English, just German. One day, I saw him. I tried to tell him something in German. Suddenly, he speaks English. And I was like, what? And I told my wife, hey, did you know the neighbor speaks English? And she was like, no, really? So yeah, this is a great one, and I note it personally because honestly, I've been living in Germany for about a year now, but I don't use German. It's something that I just very rarely. It's something that I'm missing. So I take this as an opportunity to get a reminder and to practice a little bit more German. So that's really a really cool reminder, Tanya, and a very powerful advice. There is a completely out of context question that I would like to ask you now. It's not completely out of context, but at the beginning of the interview, you said very just by, you were talking and just, it was a mess, but there's always a message in a mess. And I take note of those things when guests show that there is something a little bit philosophical, a little bit some wisdom. And now I take the opportunity to ask you if you can elaborate on this point.
Well, I think most of the times where my transitions happened was in a mess. And I think when we met, Jeff, before we met, I was going through a transition. We just moved here to Strasbourg, and I was trying to, kind of establish myself, start networking, and I went to a recent network, very French network. So I speak French. I think I speak French okay, right, Jeff?
Oh, it's very good. It's amazing.
Oh, because since I'm speaking English, I just wanted to check in. So, I went to this networking and all in French. It was basically businesses that got together and spoke on a common theme. And I got to talking to a person who was a general manager of a small company in the pharmaceuticals. And we got to talking on really well. And it was about cross cultures and, how Americans work versus the French and then the Slovenians and the Germans. And we got into a really, really interesting talk. And then, how you break up in an interview, in a networking, you get drinks, you listen, and you kind of go bounce from person to person. Well, before I left, he came to me and he offered me a job. He said, I really want you to come and speak to my team. I really would like that. And I said no. I said no because I had fear of speaking in French. I turned down a very good opportunity, and that was a mess. But that mess led me to Toastmasters, and that's where I met you because I realized that what I did, I was fearful. I thought I've got an accent, this is not gonna work. I made up so many beautiful ideas of why not to do it. It was a completely beautiful mess. But with that mess, I attended Toastmasters. I regained a bit more clarity and confidence thanks to a great group of people. My gosh, I think I had some great mentors. And yeah, that really helped me to bounce forward. And so that's what I meant by taking a mess and turning it into a message. So really, the night that happened, I think it was the next week, I Googled Toastmasters and I thought, oh, thank God they're in Strasbourg. And I called Stefan and the rest was history. I was in. So when you said at the beginning that you appreciate and you consider me a mentor, I thought, oh my gosh, if you only knew where I came from.
Somehow it always comes back to Toastmasters.
Oh yeah.
we have two themes, Toastmasters and networking in this podcast, apparently. But it's really funny, and I really appreciate you saying that because I think so many people, especially in the coaching space, don't talk about how difficult it was to get there. I started my professional career as an accountant. And I don't know if you know anything about accountants, but they are not known for their soft skills.
No.
And I deeply missed working with them. I definitely saw fatigue after years and years of being locked in a fairly small conference room with 3 or 4 people. And that was my life. And funnily enough, I used to love public speaking as a child. Speaking in front of crowds and in front. Yeah, I loved it. I loved being able to talk to tons of people all at once. And then at one point, I wanted to be a professional musician. And then I figured out they don't make a ton of money. And that's probably not where I want to be for the rest of my life. So I decided to go towards the finance route. And then everything soft skill fell apart. And now that I kind of am making my way back towards this realm of not just building soft skills, but teaching people about their own capability when it comes to interpersonal communication, it fascinates me why coaches don't talk more about how difficult it was to get there. Because if I'm going to go to someone for a skill, especially a skill as important as public speaking or as networking or as figuring out how to exist in a new country and build my career there, I want to go to someone who did it from the ground up. I don't want someone who naturally has those talents, naturally has those abilities, right? The same way I wouldn't take dating advice from someone who's really good looking. That doesn't make sense.
That's a good one.
Come on, just do it. Just say hi and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My favorite trope in networking is just be confident. All you have to do is be confident. What does that even mean, right? But The idea is, I really appreciate you talking about the one time that you had to give up something really, really cool because you weren't sure about your skills. And I'm sure so many people out there are going to be in a similar position and hopefully find this podcast or other tools or things of that nature to bring them that level of security. Um, you know, going a little bit back because I'm curious about how, you know, your personal life led to this career, I guess, building and how you take time to really integrate and appreciate not just the places that you're in, right? But the places that people bring you. Um, you mentioned that your husband was Colombian, and Hungarian, was it?
No, he's Colombian, and
Colombian,
his mother's side is Austrian.
Austrian. Okay, I'm thinking of my own cousin. My cousin comes from Hungary, but he's also Mexican. But when you talk about what it takes to kind of integrate that into maybe not just a career, but a family and the interpersonal side of creating something unique as a relationship, what kind of ways do you build into that? What kind of ways would you recommend someone who's coming from a completely different part of the world and they want to get to know someone, create a deeper relationship with them, um, but you know, it can't just all be business. Sometimes you have to have that level of understanding of making a friend, for example. How do you create that connection or I guess coach someone into creating connection that isn't just business?
Good question. I think it all starts with that we're all humans, right? So we're human, we are, right? We are man, woman, whatever, we are a name, we have a history, we have a past, we have an inner critic, we have a good critic. There's a lot in us, so before even venturing out, ask yourself, am I myself? Who am I? Figure yourself out. I think it's the most beautiful, messy, crazy adventure that's called life. Know who you are, and I think this is something that just it comes from me, and it's something I had to do to figure things out, being moved, especially when we were in the States. There was this dualness of, at home we were Slovenian, and when I left, outside we were in Milwaukee, we were in the US. It was, the American language, the culture, and the high school, everything that goes with it. And those are systems or communities or groups that we belong to. But who you define as yourself, that's like you are the flower in a bouquet of other flowers. And when you know yourself and you know what makes you tick, your limits, also your weaknesses, the messy stuff, the things you don't want to show up with. When you truly know, I think it was Robin Williams that said, be yourself. Yeah, it's easy to say be yourself, but when you don't know it, go there, figure it out, and oftentimes, we all think just by talking it's going to happen. Well, no, we're people that have emotions. We talk about the intelligence, the heart, and the intuition, and we leave that whole intuition to the side. Well, that intuition is an incredible wealth of knowledge of who we are. So if we feel like we're talking to someone and we force ourselves to talk, but our gut says, oh God, I don't know, why are we forcing ourselves to have that conversation? Okay, we need to be polite, but the intuition is telling us, okay, this is a limit, you don't know the language, this is not feeling right. Why aren't we listening to this? why are we faking it till we're making it? I'm sorry, but I that whole faking it to making it, that can be harmful to you. But this is, again, this is my opinion. So point one is start where you are, who you are, get to know yourself, get to know who you are. And we never really know 100%, and it's good. I think it's good not to know 100%. It's good to know little by little. And along the way, something that I truly believe, once that's somewhat in place and you know your limits, what you like, what you don't like, where you tick, where you tack, try little things, try a little bit, for example, when people say, oh, I want the best paying job with the top 50 most biggest companies in the world. How do I get there? And I'm like, well, do you know yourself? Do you know if that's a fit for you? Yeah, I want to go there, but I'm timid, I'm shy, I don't want to talk, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. Well, those are some things that you want to kind of think about. So, in short, get to know yourself. Take a little peek. You'll find some beautiful
Yeah.
things.
Wow, that's really a beautiful answer, and I completely echo it with my personal experience. And it's funny because for me, knowing myself was a process that public speaking helped with, by going on stage, improvising on silly topics like we like to do in Toastmasters with those legendary improvisations.
Exactly.
I am doing crazy things on stage and facing my fears, because you said, yeah, you said you need to know yourself, and what do I do if I fear this and I fear that, and I fear, yeah, that's the point. That's the point. If there are many things that you fear, you are blocked in your vision, in your options, but you're also blocked in knowing yourself. And by facing your fears, you gain a lot of understanding, and you discover that there was big parts of you that you couldn't express, that were hidden, that were inhibited, and those are the parts that will bring the most meaning in your life.
Absolutely.
That's
And I agree with you, Toastmasters. I'm sorry, we're doing this again. That helped me a lot as well to uncover those messes and bring the messages out. Absolutely.
the question I would like to ask you. I think you have events and projects coming. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I am basically I think the next event that's coming up end of May, beginning of June. It's basically about what job do I want to do, or jobs, or finding yourself in this professional world that we're in, that is changing as we speak. And so that's one event that I'm having coming up. And then also in the fall, I have regular events like how to put your resume together, interview, and the one event that I love to do is how to network in different languages. So that's pretty much coming up from September on onwards through December.
I'm definitely gonna have to check out that networking one.
Yeah, please do.
So, Jeff and I really started this podcast for two reasons. One, purely selfishly, we think people are incredible. They're so cool, and we want to get to know them and their journeys and what brought them to where they are. Because for us, uh, people are just the most incredible creatures out there. But the second is, because we know they're so incredible and because we know they're capable of so much, we want to empower our listeners with even just a sliver of the skills that they need to succeed from our guests. And so we ask all of our guests to give us one skill that had led them to their success, led you to your success, that someone can get started with today.
What would I say? Let's have some fun and just do it. That's what I would say. Just do it. Stop sitting in your mind and just do it. And when I say do it, you don't have to go like all out and do something crazy. Just when I say just do it, a small step. Let's say you've been thinking long and hard about, I don't know, dancing or trying a new, trying to drive or I don't know, something totally new. Take it at a baby step, but stop staying in your mind and go do it. And if you can't do it, ask a friend and be less alone, because alone you can go faster, but with other people you can go farther.
Yes, again, something that I deeply echo also. Just do a small step and see what happens. Tanja, thank you so much. You share with us so much insights and a lot of wisdom also. And it's not finished because the hardest question will start now.
Ooh. Can I leave now? Uh-oh.
So, for 2 minutes, I will hand you the magic microphone. And the magic microphone is magic because it allows you to leave a message to everyone on Earth. Even the people who are not born today. It's your unique chance to leave a timeless and universal message. Take as much time as you want to think and tell us what you would like to share.
No pressure, right? What would I say? What would I say? Start where you are. Do what you can with what you have. And if you need help, ask. There's always someone there. As you said before, every person here on this earth, and I really believe this, you, Charles, I think you said it, or Jeff, I don't remember. Every person is amazing. Since that is the case, you don't know until you ask. And when you ask, you'll be so surprised. So I think that's what my heart is saying. So that's what I would say to the future who hasn't been born, because that's something I would say to my little self, my little Tanja, little Tanyushka.
Yes.
Wow. What an incredible message. Tanja, thank you so much for joining us. Before we leave, where can people find you?
Where they can find me? Well, they can find me with my name, which is Tanja, not the Y. I had to change that, and my last name. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and I also have a website. It's called Teepee Talk. So the teepee is like, the little tent, which indicates for shy, timid people who need that security. I also have a website that's bilingual in French and in English that covers articles on job search, on different tips and tricks, as well as events. And that's where you can find me.
Incredible. Wow. And we'll make sure to have those links posted in the description below. Tanja, thank you so much for joining us. It was really incredible. You have so much insight, not just into the world of finding a job all over the world, but really what it means to be an incredible person and embrace not just great cultures, but yourself. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Charles. And thank you, Jeffrey. Merci, Jeffrey.
Merci beaucoup.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you made it this far, make sure to like, subscribe, send this to a friend, whether or not they're planning to move out of the country or not. This might help. And make sure to follow us and find new episodes of Casually Pro every Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.